What if the woman who loved you like a mother was abandoned and forgotten by your own family? Would you walk away, or would you fight to make things right? Benjamin Carter grew up surrounded by everything money could buy: towering mansions, glittering chandeliers, luxury cars parked in endless rows. But in the cold, silent corridors of the Carter estate, young Ben learned a cruel truth. Wealth could buy comfort, but it couldn't buy love. His parents, William and Eleanor Carter, were titans of industry. William, a ruthless real estate mogul, and Eleanor, a brilliant investor with a steel-sharp smile. Their empire, Carter Enterprises, stretched across continents, and their faces graced the covers of business magazines. But to Ben, they were ghosts. William and Eleanor were always somewhere else. Tokyo for a merger, London for a gala, Zurich for a banking summit. They left Ben behind in the 20,000-square-foot mansion, a gilded prison filled with priceless art and staff who barely knew his name. He spent birthdays blowing out candles alone, Christmas mornings staring at mountains of gifts he hadn't wished for. He learned early that asking for their time was pointless. His father's secretary once told him, "Your father's schedule is booked months in advance, Master Ben." His mother left notes instead of hugs, signing them with her neat, practiced signature. Then came Grace Foster. She was 28 when she arrived, a warm, kind woman with gentle eyes and a laugh like sunlight breaking through clouds. She wasn't like the other nannies who treated Ben like a job. Grace saw him not the heir to a vast fortune, but the boy behind the lonely eyes. "Ben, real strength isn't in your bank account," she'd say, pressing a hand to his chest. "It's here, in your heart." Grace was his refuge. She taught him to tie his shoes, to ride a bike, to read the stories he loved. When his nightmares woke him, it was Grace who held him, whispering comforting words until he fell back asleep. She wasn't just his nanny, she was family. Together, they built a world of their own. Grace snuck him cookies when the chef's back was turned, read him stories of far-off lands, and sang him lullabies on stormy nights. Under her care, Ben laughed, dreamed, and dared to hope. But as he grew older, the world outside their little bubble became colder. The staff whispered behind closed doors, eyes averted when he walked by. His parents' absence became a wound he couldn't ignore. When he was 12, he asked his mother why she never came to his school events. "Because, darling, we're building a future for you," Eleanor replied, barely looking up from her tablet. "One day you'll understand." But Ben never understood. At 14, he stopped asking for their time. At 16, he stopped caring. The love he'd once craved turned to bitterness, buried beneath resentment. But Grace never changed. Even as Ben grew distant and cynical, she remained a constant light in his life. She never judged, never scolded. Instead, she listened. "Sometimes people love the wrong things, Ben," she told him one rainy evening, her hand brushing a lock of his hair aside. "But that doesn't mean they don't care. It just means they're lost." Her words stayed with him, even when he pretended they didn't. At 18, Ben received a full scholarship to a prestigious university. He left the mansion without a backward glance, eager to escape the shadows of his parents and their cold, transactional world. But he promised Grace he'd keep in touch. "I'll write," he told her, hugging her tightly. "I'll call. I won't forget you." Grace smiled, though there was a sadness in her eyes. "I know you won't." But college was a whirlwind. Ben buried himself in studies, determined to prove he was more than a Carter name. He excelled in business, won awards, and soon found himself building his own empire, a series of tech startups that exploded in success. By 25, he was a millionaire. By 30, a billionaire. But with each success, his world grew colder. Business meetings replaced friendships. Contracts replaced conversations. His phone buzzed with stock updates, but there were no messages from the one person who'd once made him feel seen. Grace Foster became a memory, a distant warmth in a life of steel and glass. He told himself she was fine, that she'd moved on. After all, she was just a nanny. But he was wrong. Grace Foster's world fell apart the day Ben left for college. 2 weeks later, she received a formal letter from William Carter's office. Her employment was terminated effective immediately, without severance, without warning. She packed her belongings in silence, her hands trembling, her mind racing. No goodbye, no explanation, just an empty promise that someone would be in touch. But no one ever was. Grace tried to reach Ben, but her calls went unanswered. His assistants dismissed her, telling her he was too busy. Her letters went unanswered. The boy she had loved like a son was gone. With no savings, no family, and no one to turn to, Grace found herself struggling. Job interviews ended with polite rejections. Rumors spread that she was unreliable, even a thieflies whispered by those loyal to the Carters. She moved from one cheap apartment to another, eventually finding work in a rundown cafe. Her hands, once soft from caring for Ben, became calloused from washing dishes and serving strangers. But she never stopped thinking about Ben, wondering if he remembered her, if he ever missed her. But in the cold, uncaring city, Grace became a forgotten name, a distant memory. She would sometimes walk by the Carter estate, staring at the towering gates, hoping to catch a glimpse of the boy she had raised. But those gates never opened for her. To the Carters, she was invisible, but in her heart, she held on to a small hope that one day Ben would remember her. Benjamin Carter never imagined that a simple cafe could feel like stepping into another world. The bustling clatter of plates, the hiss of the coffee machine, the murmur of tired voices, it was all so far removed from his world of boardrooms and penthouses. But there she was, Grace Foster, thin, weary, but unmistakably Grace. She moved between tables, a polite but tired smile on her face. His heart pounded. He hadn't seen her in years, but he would know her anywhere. He waited, watching, his mind racing. How had she ended up here, pouring coffee for strangers? What had happened to the woman who had been his entire world? As the crowd thinned, he raised his hand. "Excuse me." Grace turned, her smile fading. Her tray wobbled. "Ben," she whispered, disbelief filling her voice. "It's been a while," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. Grace set down her tray, her hands trembling. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing." His eyes swept over the faded uniform, the tired lines on her face. "Grace, what happened?" Her expression hardened slightly. "Life happened, Ben. It's complicated." "Can we talk?" he asked, desperate. Grace hesitated, then nodded. "My shift ends in 10 minutes. Wait outside." Ben stood by the window, his heart racing. Memories flooded back, the bedtime stories, the laughter, the love. How had he let her slip away? Benjamin Carter paced nervously outside the cafe, the cold wind biting at his face, but the chill inside him was far worse. How had he let it come to this? How had Grace Foster, the woman who had loved him like a son, ended up here serving coffee in a rundown diner, her once bright smile now a tired shadow? The door swung open, and Grace stepped out, pulling a threadbare coat tighter around her thin frame. She hesitated for a moment, studying Ben with a look he couldn't quite read, surprise, sadness, maybe even a touch of anger. "Grace, I didn't know." "I had no idea," Ben started, but she held up a hand. "Let's not do this here," she said, her voice steady but distant. "There's a park around the corner." They walked in silence, the city lights flickering above them, the bustling noise of traffic a distant hum. Finally, they reached a bench beneath a bare, skeletal tree. Grace sat down first, staring at the damp ground. "Talk, Ben," she said quietly. "You wanted to talk. I thought you were fine. I thought you moved on to a better life after I left," Ben stammered, his voice thick with guilt. "I didn't know my family. I didn't know they fired you." No severance, no warning, nothing. A bitter smile played at Grace's lips. "That's because they didn't want you to know. They made sure of it." "Made sure?" Grace sighed, her gaze still fixed on the ground. "After you went to college, I got a letter. Terminated immediately. No explanation, no goodbye. I tried to reach you, Ben. I wrote letters. I called your office. But your assistant said you were too busy, too important. After a while, I stopped trying." "I never got any letters," Ben whispered, his heart pounding. "I didn't know. I was so caught up in everything, college, the business, becoming someone, but you should have been part of that." Grace laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "I should have been." "But the Carters didn't just fire me, Ben. They destroyed me. They spread rumors, said I stole, that I was unreliable. They made sure I couldn't find work, not in a good home, not anywhere." Ben's hands clenched into fists. Anger burned in his chest, but the shame was even stronger. "I can't believe they would do that. I thought they were just distant. But this is cruel." "They were protecting their image," Grace continued, finally looking up, her eyes sharp with a pain Ben had never seen before. "A billionaire family doesn't just let a nanny go without a reason, so they made one." "I'm so sorry, Grace. I don't even know what to say," Ben choked out. "Don't say anything, Ben. What's done is done. I survived." "But you shouldn't have had to," he insisted. "I can fix this. I can make it right. I have money, influence. I can get you out of this place. A new apartment, a new job, anything you want." Grace's expression softened, but her smile was sad. "That's just it, Ben. You think money can fix everything. But this isn't about money, it's about dignity, about being treated like a human being." "I can help you rebuild," Ben persisted. "You deserve so much more than this." Grace shook her head. "What I deserve is to be remembered, to be respected, not pitied." Her words struck Ben like a blow. He realized that in his rush to solve everything with money, he was doing exactly what his parents had always done, treating people as problems to be managed, not as human beings with feelings, with stories, with pride. "I don't want your pity, Ben. I don't need a penthouse or a blank check. I need to know that I mattered, that I wasn't just some disposable servant in your family's story." "You weren't disposable," Ben whispered, tears stinging his eyes. "You were everything. I wouldn't be who I am without you. You're the only person who ever loved me without expecting anything in return." Silence stretched between them. Grace's expression softened, but her shoulders remained tense. "Ben, I don't need you to fix my life. I just need you to see me," she said quietly. "See me as more than just the nanny who raised you." Ben nodded slowly. "Then, let me prove it. Let me be there for you this time. Not with money, but with time, with respect." "Please, Grace." For a moment, Grace seemed to hesitate. But then she smiled a real smile, small but warm. "We'll see." They walked back to the cafe in silence, the air between them no longer cold, but filled with something else, an unspoken understanding, a bridge slowly being rebuilt. As Ben watched her disappear back into the glow of the cafe, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose, a need to make things right, not just for Grace, but for himself. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a billionaire trying to buy his way out of guilt. He felt like a man trying to earn forgiveness. Benjamin Carter couldn't shake the gnawing guilt clawing at his chest. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Grace foster her tired smile, her worn hands clutching that thin coat against the cold. He had promised to help her, to be there for her, but his words felt hollow without action, so he did what he knew best, he investigated. Sitting in his penthouse office, surrounded by towering windows and sleek marble walls, Ben tapped his fingers on his polished desk, staring at the screen of his laptop. He had instructed his private investigator to find everything about what happened to Grace after she was dismissed. And now the file was here. He opened it with a sense of dread, his stomach twisting with each page. Grace hadn't just been let go, she'd been erased. The documents revealed a disturbing truth. Martin Reynolds, the family lawyer, had orchestrated a smear campaign against Grace. Letters sent to potential employers painted her as unreliable, even a thief. Fake theft reports were filed, making her unemployable. Ben's hands trembled. This wasn't negligence. This was cruelty. The deeper he read, the worse it became. There were even records of payments made to hush up any questions about her departure. The Carters had paid to keep Grace's life buried under a mountain of lies, and Martin Reynolds had ensured it stayed that way. Why? Ben whispered, anger boiling beneath his shock. But he knew the answer. His parents hadn't cared about Grace. To them, she was just a servant, someone disposable, someone whose dignity meant nothing as long as their image remained untarnished. Ben leaned back in his chair, staring at the cityscape. He had spent years idolizing his parents' success, trying to live up to the Carter legacy. But now that legacy felt like a noose around his neck, a symbol of cold, calculated power built on the suffering of others. But it didn't end there. There was a letter and email from his mother, Eleanor Carter, to Martin Reynolds, dated a year after Grace's dismissal. Ensure Harper never contacts Benjamin. She's a liability. Pay whatever it takes to keep her silent. Grace hadn't just been forgotten. She had been silenced. And they had done it in his name, claiming to protect him. But it was a lie. It was about protecting themselves. Ben's jaw tightened. He could see it so clearly now, the image of his parents, calculating, ruthless, manipulating lives with a single stroke of a pen, and he had been blind to it. Not anymore, he whispered. He stood up, grabbing his phone. Get me Martin Reynolds, now! His assistant's voice crackled through the speaker. Right away, Mr. Carter. Minutes later, Martin's smug voice filled the line. Benjamin, always a pleasure. How can I help you? Save it, Ben snapped, his voice ice cold. I know everything, Martin, about Grace. About the lies, about my parents paying you to destroy her life, and about how you kept the money. Silence. Then a nervous chuckle. Ben, you must be mistaken. That was a long time ago. Your parents, they made difficult decisions, but always for the best. The best? Ben's voice rose, sharp and unyielding. The best for who? You took everything from her. You destroyed an innocent woman's life, and you did it for money, for power. Now, Ben, calm down. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. Ben's fist slammed against the desk. You are going to fix this, Martin, or I will make sure you never practice law again. I will ruin you. Ben, be reasonable. Martin's tone turned desperate. This could harm the Carter name, your parents. They're dead, Ben interrupted, his voice a razor's edge. And their name doesn't mean a thing to me if it's built on the suffering of others. So here's what you're going to do. You will draft a formal apology to Grace. You will clear her name, and you will pay her restitution for the years of pain you caused. Silence. You can't be serious, Martin stuttered. Oh, I am. And you will do it quietly, or I will drag you and every dirty secret you've ever buried into the light. There was a long pause, then the faint sound of Martin's shaky breath. Fine, I'll do it. By the end of the week, Martin. And if you so much as think about crossing me. I understand, Martin whispered, defeated. Ben ended the call, his heart pounding. His hands were still shaking, but beneath the anger was a growing sense of purpose. This wasn't just about fixing what his family had done to Grace. It was about reclaiming his own life, his own values. It was about becoming someone he could be proud of. But there was one more thing he had to do. He grabbed his coat and left the office, his driver waiting at the entrance. "Where to, sir?" "The cafe. Grace's cafe," Ben said. He would tell her everything. He would show her that he was more than just another Carter. He would be the man she always believed he could be. As the car sped through the city, Ben stared at the glittering skyline, the empire his parents had built, an empire that now felt like a hollow fortress. But he was ready to tear down the walls. For Grace, for himself, for a future he could finally believe in. Benjamin Carter sat across from Grace Foster in the small cafe, the same one where they had first reconnected. But today, the air was different, charged, tense, and filled with the weight of unspoken words. He had come to tell her everything. "Grace," he began, his voice steady, but his hands clasped tightly together. "I know the truth now. About what my family did to you, about the lies, the blacklisting, the life they stole from you." Grace's expression was unreadable, her gaze calm but cautious. "You didn't have to tell me, Ben. I lived it." "I do have to tell you," he insisted, leaning forward. "I need you to know that I didn't know. That I would never have let that happen if I'd known. And I'm going to make it right." She sighed, looking down at her weathered hands. "Make it right." "Ben, you can't rewrite the past. You can't give me back those years." "No, I can't," he admitted, his voice thick with guilt. "But I can give you back your dignity. I can give you a future." Grace's lips curved into a faint smile. "I told you, Ben. I don't need a penthouse or a blank check. I've made my life here. It may not be much, but it's mine." "That's not enough," he said, shaking his head. "You deserve so much more. You deserve a life where you can help others, a life with purpose, and I have an idea." Grace raised an eyebrow. "An idea? I want to create something that means more than just money. Something that helps people like you who've been forgotten, ignored, mistreated." Ben's eyes lit with determination. "A foundation. Grace's Haven, named after you." "Grace's Haven," she repeated, a mix of surprise and disbelief in her voice. "A foundation that helps people rebuild their lives, shelters, education programs, legal support. It would be a place where people who have been mistreated can find hope again. And I want you to run it." Grace laughed, a soft, almost bitter laugh. "Run it, Ben. I'm not qualified to run a foundation. I'm just an old woman who spent the last decade pouring coffee." "You're not just an old woman, Grace," he said firmly. "You're the person who taught me about kindness, about integrity, about strength. Those are the values this foundation will stand for, and I want you to be the heart of it." Grace looked away, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. "And what would I even do? Give speeches? Shake hands with rich people? That's not me, Ben." "No," he replied, leaning closer. "You would do what you've always done, help people. Mentor them, listen to them, guide them. You'd be the person you've always been, but with the resources to change lives." She was silent for a long moment, the only sound the quiet hum of the cafe around them. Finally, she looked up, her eyes searching his. "And what do you get out of this, Ben? Guilt relief? A way to look like a hero?" The question hit him harder than he expected. But he didn't flinch. "No," he said softly. "I get the chance to make something good out of everything that went wrong. I get the chance to do something I'm actually proud of." Grace's gaze softened. "And if I say no?" "Then I'll still create the foundation," he answered. "But it won't be the same without you. Because you're the inspiration. You're the reason I want to do this." She smiled an honest, warm smile, the kind Ben remembered from his childhood. "Ben Carter, you always were a stubborn boy." "I learned from the best," he grinned. Grace shook her head, a soft laugh escaping her. "If you're serious about this, if you really want to make a difference, then yes, I'll do it, but on my terms." No fancy titles, no red carpets, just real work for real people. Deal, Ben said, relief flooding through him. But his mission wasn't finished. The next day, Ben walked into the towering glass headquarters of Carter Enterprises. His executives greeted him with their usual polite smiles, but he saw through it now, the same cold, transactional loyalty that had defined his parents. Not anymore. Ben called an emergency meeting, the board members filing into the sleek conference room, their murmurs filling the space. They expected another strategic expansion, another profit-driven announcement, but Ben's tone silenced them. Effective immediately, he announced, we will begin an internal audit of all departments. Any unethical practices, any exploitation, any hidden corruption will be exposed and eliminated. Murmurs grew louder. Faces paled. Those who cannot abide by a code of ethics, those who think this company is just a machine for squeezing profits, are welcome to leave now. One board member, an older man with silver hair, leaned forward. Ben, this is drastic. Our shareholders can either support a company built on integrity or they can invest elsewhere, Ben interrupted, his voice firm. Carter Enterprises was built on the backs of people like Grace Foster, people who were treated as disposable. That ends today. Silence. Ben scanned the room, his gaze unyielding. We will become a company known for making a difference, not just for making money. Over the next few weeks, Carter Enterprises transformed. Corrupt executives were ousted. Exploitative contracts were torn up. Divisions built on unethical practices were sold, and the profits were directed straight into Grace's Haven. Grace's Haven became a beacon of hope. Shelters were established for displaced workers, educational programs for single parents, legal aid for the wrongly accused. And at its heart was Grace Foster, no longer a forgotten name, but a leader, a mentor, a voice for the voiceless. Every time Ben visited the bustling offices of Grace's Haven, watching Grace guide a young mother or counsel a struggling worker, he felt a weight lift from his chest. This was his redemption. This was their legacy. But most importantly, this was Grace's second chance, one she had earned, one she deserved. And for the first time in his life, Benjamin Carter felt like he was becoming the man he was meant to be. Grace Foster walked down the brightly lit hallway of Grace's Haven, her footsteps soft but steady. The walls were lined with photos, smiling families, children with diplomas, young mothers finding jobs, each one, a life changed. And at the center of it all, her name stood etched in silver letters above the main entrance, Grace's Haven. But Grace never saw it as her achievement. To her, it was simply a place where she could do what she had always done: care, listen, guide. She moved between the bustling offices, a calming presence among the staff, a voice of reason for those who felt lost. Mrs. Foster, can you talk to Daniel? He's having a rough day, one of the counselors whispered. Grace nodded, walking into a small, bright room where a young man sat hunched over, tears in his eyes. He looked up as she entered, his expression a mix of anger and shame. Daniel, Grace said gently, sitting down across from him. What's going on? I messed up. I got into a fight at work. They're talking about firing me, he muttered, wiping his eyes. And if I lose this job, I'm back on the street. Grace reached across, taking his trembling hand in hers. We all make mistakes, Daniel. But one mistake doesn't define you. What matters is what you do next. But they won't listen. Then I will, she interrupted, her voice calm but firm. I'll talk to them. I'll help you make this right. But you have to be honest with yourself. Why did you lash out? Daniel hesitated, then his shoulders sagged. I was scared. Everything's falling apart and I don't know how to fix it. Grace smiled, a warm, patient smile that Ben had known all his life. You don't have to fix it all at once, just take one step at a time. And remember, you're not alone. She left Daniel with a promise to speak with his employer, feeling a familiar sense of purpose. But as she stepped back into the hallway, she nearly bumped into Ben. "Am I interrupting?" he asked, smiling. "Not at all," Grace replied, though there was a soft blush on her cheeks. "I didn't expect to see you today." "I had some free time, thought I'd check in," Ben said, but the way he leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets, told her there was more on his mind. "Free time?" Grace teased, crossing her arms. "You? The unstoppable Benjamin Carter?" He chuckled, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "I guess even the unstoppable need a break." Grace's smile faded slightly. "What's wrong, Ben?" He looked away, his gaze drifting to the photos on the wall. "I thought changing the company would change everything. I cleaned house. I got rid of the corruption. I put ethics over profits. But some people, they still look at me like I'm just another Carter." "Some people will always see you as your family's name," Grace said gently. "But that doesn't mean you have to be trapped by it." "But I'm trying so hard," he whispered, the vulnerability in his voice striking Grace. "Every time I do something good, there's someone who whispers, 'He's just doing it for PR. He's just trying to clear his conscience.'" Grace stepped closer, her hand resting on his arm. "Do you remember what I used to tell you? Real strength isn't in your bank account, it's here." She tapped his chest. "And it's in what you choose to do, even when no one believes in you." Ben's shoulders relaxed slightly, her words a balm to his troubled mind. I want to be someone you can be proud of." "Ben," she whispered, her voice soft but firm, "I have always been proud of you." "Not because of your money or your success, but because you never gave up on becoming better." Tears stung at his eyes, but he blinked them away, clearing his throat. "Well, in that case, how about some coffee?" "How?" "I hear there's this amazing cafe run by a pretty incredible woman." Grace laughed, a warm, melodic sound that seemed to chase away the shadows. "Lead the way, Mr. Carter." They walked side by side to the cafe, the place where their new journey had begun. The barista greeted them with a friendly wave, and Ben ordered 2 coffees, insisting on paying this time. As they settled into the same booth where they had first reconnected, Grace looked around, her gaze warm and reflective. "It's funny, isn't it? How everything came full circle." "Not just funny," Ben replied, stirring his coffee. "It's right. This place, this foundation, it's not just for the people we help. It's for me. It's what keeps me grounded." Grace studied him, a proud smile on her lips. "I've watched you change, Ben. I've watched you grow. Not just as a businessman, but as a person. I used to think I lost you, but maybe I just needed to wait for you to find yourself." Ben looked down, a soft smile on his lips. "I think I'm still finding myself, Grace. But at least now, I have a direction." They sat in comfortable silence, the noise of the cafe a gentle hum around them. But this silence wasn't like the empty, lonely silences of his childhood. It was warm, full of understanding. "Grace's Haven is doing amazing things," Ben said finally. "But it's because of you. You're the heart of it." "No, Ben," she corrected, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "We both are. And so are all the people who walk through those doors." As they sipped their coffee, Ben felt a calmness settle over him, a peace he hadn't known in years. He wasn't just building an empire anymore. He was building something real, something good, alongside the one person who had always seen his true self. And for the first time, he felt free not from his family's shadow, but from his own doubts. Grace's Haven wasn't just a foundation. It was a promise that no one would be forgotten, that no kindness would go unnoticed, and that every life had value. And together, Ben and Grace were living that promise every day. Months passed, and Grace's Haven grew beyond what anyone had imagined. The foundation had become more than just a safe space. It was a thriving community of support, growth, and second chances. Ben Carter watched it all unfold with a quiet pride, amazed at how Grace had turned his vision into a reality far beyond his expectations. One afternoon, Ben found himself sitting in Grace's small office at the foundation. The walls were adorned with thank you notes from people whose lives had been transformed: a single mother who found a job, a young man who overcame addiction, a teenager who won a scholarship. Grace was at her desk, meticulously reviewing paperwork, her focus unwavering. "Do you ever take a break?" Ben teased, leaning against the doorframe. Grace looked up, a small smile lighting her face. "When the work's done." He stepped inside, glancing at the bustling activity through the glass walls. "You've built something incredible here." "We did," she corrected, adjusting her reading glasses. "You gave me the chance to make it happen." Ben nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more he could do. After the transformation of Carter Enterprises, he still felt like he hadn't fully repaired the damage his family had caused. "Grace," he began, hesitantly, "I've been thinking about what's next for the foundation. We're helping so many people, but I feel like we could do more, reach more communities, expand our programs." Grace put down her pen and folded her hands. "You sound just like your father when he was planning a new acquisition," she said, with a wry smile. Ben flinched slightly at the comparison, but Grace quickly softened. "But there's one big difference. You're doing it to help, not to control." Ben smiled, grateful for her reassurance. "It's just, sometimes I wonder if it's enough. The more people we help, the more I realize how many others are still struggling." Grace nodded. "You can't save the whole world, Ben, but you can make a difference in your part of it, and that's enough." He looked at her, absorbing her words. Grace had a way of simplifying the most complicated feelings, cutting through his doubts with quiet wisdom. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Lucy, one of the young women Grace had helped escape an abusive relationship. Her eyes were brighter now, her shoulders no longer hunched with fear. "Mrs. Foster, Mr. Carter," Lucy greeted them with a wide smile. "I just wanted to let you know I got the job, the bookstore downtown. They said my experience volunteering here made all the difference." "That's wonderful, Lucy," Grace exclaimed, rising to hug her. Ben grinned, giving Lucy a congratulatory nod. "You earned it. They're lucky to have you." Lucy beamed before excusing herself to share the news with her friends at the foundation. Grace watched her go, her own eyes misting over. "She came here with nothing but fear and doubt. Now look at her confident, hopeful." "That's because of you," Ben said. "You give people more than just help, you give them hope." Grace looked at him thoughtfully. "I think you do too, even if you don't realize it. When you walk through those doors, people see more than a billionaire. They see a man who believes in them." Ben let that sink in. He had spent so long defining himself by his family's legacy, by his wealth, that he hadn't considered how much his actions mattered to others. "I guess I'm still figuring out who I am," he admitted. "That's okay," Grace said softly. "Figuring it out means you're growing. And growth is messy. It's supposed to be." They spent the next hour discussing plans to expand Grace's haven, targeting areas with the highest rates of homelessness and unemployment. Grace suggested building a small housing complex for transitional support, and Ben couldn't help but feel his excitement grow. Later that evening, as they locked up, Ben offered to walk Grace home. The air was crisp, the city lights twinkling against the dusk. "You've changed, you know," Grace said as they strolled. Ben glanced at her, curious. "How so?" "You used to be so focused on proving yourself, showing the world you were more than just your parents' legacy. But now, you're more focused on doing good. You're not chasing approval. You're building something meaningful." He looked down, kicking a stray pebble. "I guess I just got tired of feeling empty." Success never felt real until it made someone else's life better. Grace nodded. "Your parents built an empire, but they never saw the people behind it. You do?" That's what makes you different. They reached Grace's building, and she turned to face him, her expression serious. You know, Ben, you've always had a good heart. You just needed to listen to it. He smiled, the tension in his chest easing. Thanks, Grace, for everything. She patted his arm. I'll see you tomorrow. Don't stay up all night plotting world-changing ideas. As Ben walked back toward his car, he couldn't help but feel lighter, as if a burden he'd been carrying for years had finally lifted. Grace's words echoed in his mind, and he knew she was right. The next morning, as he stood in his office overlooking the city, his phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Carter Enterprises increases funding for community support programs. Ben couldn't help but smile. The company had once been synonymous with ruthless business tactics. Now it was becoming a force for positive change. He sent a quick text to Grace. Let's make Grace's Haven bigger than we ever dreamed. Your way. Our way. A few moments later, her reply came. One step at a time, Ben. We'll get there. He knew she was right. They didn't have to change the world overnight. One step, one life at a time that was enough. And for the first time, Ben didn't feel like he was chasing something unattainable. He felt at peace with who he was becoming. As the sun rose higher, casting warm light over the city, he knew that he wasn't just fixing his parents' mistakes. He was building a new legacy, one rooted in kindness, integrity, and the quiet strength that Grace had always shown him. And in that moment, Benjamin Carter knew he was finally on the right path. The grand hall of Grace's Haven was filled with warm light, the soft glow of chandeliers casting a golden hue over the bustling crowd. Laughter and conversation danced through the air as guests mingled donors, volunteers, and those whose lives had been changed by the foundation. The annual fundraising gala was in full swing, and it was the largest one yet. At the center of it all stood Grace Foster, her silver-streaked hair pinned elegantly, her smile radiant as she greeted guests. She looked every bit the leader she was, a beacon of kindness and resilience. Beside her, Benjamin Carter moved through the crowd, shaking hands, sharing stories, his calm confidence a stark contrast to the arrogant businessman he once was. Mr. Carter, thank you for everything you've done, a young woman gushed, her voice full of emotion. I was on the streets before Grace's Haven helped me. Now I'm in college. I'm building a future. Ben smiled, his voice warm. You built that future yourself. We just gave you a place to start. As the night continued, Ben couldn't help but watch Grace. She moved with a quiet grace, listening to each person who approached her, offering comfort, advice, and hope. This was her world she had built, one where she had transformed lives with nothing but her unwavering belief in people. Penny for your thoughts? Grace's voice broke through his reverie. Ben turned, grinning. I was just thinking. This all started with you. A woman who refused to give up, even when my family tried to take everything from you. And a stubborn boy who wouldn't let guilt define him, Grace countered, her smile teasing but full of pride. The lights dimmed slightly, and a spotlight swept over the stage. The MC's voice echoed across the room. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The crowd quieted, turning toward the stage. The MC continued. Tonight, we celebrate not just a foundation, but a movement. Grace's Haven has touched thousands of lives, and at the heart of it all is a woman who gave everything she had to help others. Grace's smile faltered slightly as her name was called. Ben gave her a gentle nudge. Go on, he whispered. This is your moment. Grace hesitated, but as the room erupted in applause, she found herself walking to the stage, her heart pounding. She stood before the microphone, the sea of faces watching her with admiration. I don't know what to say, she began, her voice wavering. I never imagined my life would lead here. I never thought that someone like me, someone who was once lost, could be found again. She looked at Ben, her gaze warm. But I was found. I was given a second chance, and that's what Grace's Haven is, a place for second chances. The audience leaned in, captivated by her quiet strength. I've seen lives transformed here. I've seen people who thought they had nothing discover they had everything: courage, hope, resilience. And I've seen people with everything realize that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the love we give. Grace's voice grew steadier, her confidence building. But this wasn't just me. This was Benjamin Carter, who turned his family's empire into a force for good. A man who chose kindness over greed, who chose to build something that truly matters. Ben's face flushed, but his smile was one of quiet pride. And it was all of you, Grace continued, her gaze sweeping the room. The volunteers, the donors, the people who come here every day to rebuild their lives. You are Grace's Haven. You are the proof that kindness is stronger than cruelty. Applause filled the room, a standing ovation rising around her. Grace stepped back, tears shining in her eyes, as the MC returned to the stage. Thank you, Grace. And now, to honor the woman who has given so much, we have a special surprise. The lights dimmed again, and a screen descended from the ceiling. A video began to play, stories of people whose lives had been changed by Grace's Haven. A mother who found shelter after escaping abuse. A young man who became a social worker after being mentored by Grace. A former addict who now ran his own support group. Each face, each voice spoke of gratitude, of second chances, of hope. And in every story, there was one constant: Grace's name. As the video ended, the screen displayed a single, glowing line of text. Thank you, Grace, for never giving up on us. Grace wiped her tears, overwhelmed by emotion. Ben walked up to the stage, taking her hand gently. Surprised? He whispered, grinning. You did all this? She stammered, her voice choked with emotion. Not just me, Ben replied, turning to the crowd. All of them, all of us. This is your legacy, Grace, a legacy of kindness. The applause roared again, and as Grace looked out at the sea of faces, she saw more than just a crowd. She saw a family, one built not by blood, but by love, compassion, and second chances. As the night wound down, Ben and Grace stood side by side, watching as guests mingled, laughter and joy filling the air. Ben, Grace said softly, I never thought I'd have this. A life where I could actually make a difference. You gave me everything when I had no one, Ben replied. I'm just giving a little of that back. Grace smiled, leaning against his shoulder. You gave me more than that, Ben. You gave me hope again. And you gave me purpose, he whispered. They stood there in the warm glow of the hall, a quiet peace settling over them. Ben wasn't just a billionaire trying to fix his family's mistakes. He was a man who had learned the true meaning of wealth from a woman who had never given up on him. And Grace wasn't just a former nanny who had been cast aside. She was a leader, a mentor, a light in the darkness. Together, they had transformed lives, starting with their own. This story of Benjamin Carter and Grace Foster is a testament to the transformative power of compassion and second chances. At its core, it reminds us that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch, the kindness we offer, and the dignity we preserve in others. For Grace, who lost everything but never gave up on her values, dignity was worth more than any fortune. For Ben, who was born into unimaginable wealth but starved for love, true success came not from accumulating riches, but from using his influence to heal, to uplift, and to make amends. Their journey teaches us that it is never too late to right a wrong, to rebuild a broken bond, or to become the person we aspire to be. It reminds us that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves, and that even the most damaged legacies can be redeemed through humility, empathy, and purpose. No matter our age or our mistakes, we can always choose to be a force for good in the lives of those around us. And in the end, it is the love we give and the hope we inspire that become our true legacy.